My name is Adifir Petrov. At the time this story happened, I was 32 years old and working as a logistics coordinator for Aegis Vertex Systems, a private security technology company with offices across several states. I had transferred to headquarters less than 6 months earlier, hoping for a fresh start after spending years managing warehouse operations and supply chains in regional branches. I wasn't the type of employee people remembered. I arrived on time, completed my assignments, avoided office gossip, and went home. My goal was simple: build a stable career and stay away from unnecessary problems. That plan lasted until one rainy Thursday night. The most important person in this story, besides me, was Alara Voskalder. The first time I saw her, she looked nothing like the confident cybersecurity consultant I would later come to know. She was sitting alone near a bus stop, soaked by rain, visibly intoxicated, and struggling to remain conscious. At the time, she appeared to be just another stranger who had made a series of bad decisions. I would eventually learn that she was carrying information capable of destroying careers and exposing a conspiracy hidden inside my own company. Then there was Dr. Maria Voskalder. She was one of the most powerful executives at Aegis Vertex Systems and, unknown to me at the beginning, my direct superior. Employees rarely interacted with her unless they occupied senior leadership positions. She had a reputation for discipline, precision, and demanding excellence from everyone around her. People respected her. Some feared her. Almost nobody truly knew her. The final key figure was Celine Voskalder. Officially, she was an external restructuring consultant hired by the board of directors to oversee a major corporate transition project. She was intelligent, charismatic, and trusted by nearly everyone who worked alongside her. Her reputation was nearly flawless, which made it difficult for anyone to suspect what she was really doing behind closed doors. At the beginning of the story, I believed success depended on hard work, honesty, and patience. By the end, I would learn that the truth often survives only because someone refuses to stop asking questions. This is the story of how a single ride home changed my life. The night everything started was colder than usual. Rain had been falling for hours. By the time I finished inspecting a warehouse facility on the outskirts of the city, the parking lot was nearly empty. Most employees had already gone home, leaving only a few security guards and maintenance workers behind. I checked the time on my phone. 11:40 p.m. All I wanted was a hot shower and a few hours of sleep before returning to work the next morning. I climbed into my car and started the engine. The windshield wipers immediately began pushing away sheets of rain. Traffic was light. The roads were nearly deserted. For the first 15 minutes, nothing seemed unusual. Then I noticed someone sitting alone near a bus stop. At first, I almost drove past. The city was full of people waiting for rides, buses, or friends. There was no reason to think this situation was any different. But as my headlights swept across the sidewalk, something caught my attention. The woman wasn't sitting on the bench. She was sitting directly on the curb. Half of her body was exposed to the rain. Her head hung forward. She wasn't moving. I slowed down. For a brief moment, I considered calling emergency services and continuing home. Then the woman suddenly tried to stand. She stumbled immediately. 1 step, 2 steps. Then she nearly walked straight into the road. I hit the brakes. My heart jumped. What the hell? I pulled onto the shoulder and parked. The rain intensified as I stepped outside. Water soaked my jacket within seconds. The woman was struggling to maintain her balance. Up close, she looked to be in her late 20s. Her clothing was expensive. Her shoes alone probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Yet she looked completely exhausted. Her makeup had partially washed away. Her hair was soaked. Most concerning of all, she seemed barely aware of her surroundings. Hey! She looked toward me. Her eyes struggled to focus. You okay? For several seconds, she didn't answer. Then she laughed weakly. No, that wasn't encouraging. I glanced around the area. Nobody else was nearby. No taxis. No buses. No pedestrians. Nothing. You shouldn't be standing this close to the road. She nodded slowly, then nearly lost her balance again. I grabbed her arm before she could fall. Easy. Sorry. Her speech was slurred but understandable. Long night. I helped her move beneath the bus stop shelter. The protection from the rain wasn't perfect, but it was better than standing completely exposed. "You have someone I can call?" I asked. She searched her pockets, then her purse, then her coat. A look of frustration crossed her face. "My phone died." I sighed. "Of course it did. Do you remember any phone numbers?" "No." "Your address?" She stared at me. For a moment, I wasn't sure whether she understood the question. Then she suddenly pointed at my jacket. The company logo was visible near my chest. Aegis Vertex Systems. Her expression changed. "You work for Aegis?" The question surprised me. "Yeah." She laughed softly. "So do I." That surprised me even more. I studied her face carefully. I didn't recognize her. Then again, Aegis employed thousands of people. "You work there?" "Work there." "Worked." She nodded. "Consulting project." Her words sounded fragmented, almost like she was struggling to stay awake. I wasn't sure how much of what she said was reliable. "What department?" She hesitated, then shrugged. "Complicated." Something about her answer felt strange. Before I could ask another question, she pressed both hands against her temples. "You ever get the feeling somebody doesn't want you looking at something?" I frowned. "What?" She looked directly at me. For the first time, her expression seemed completely sober, almost frightened. Then the moment disappeared. She laughed again. "Forget it." A chill ran through me. The sudden change in her behavior felt unsettling. I couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the way she said it. Maybe it was the look in her eyes. Whatever the reason, I found myself paying closer attention. "What's your name?" I asked. "Ilara." She paused. "Ilara Voskalder." The name meant nothing to me. At least not yet. "Okay, Ilara. Tell me where you live." This time she managed to provide a full address. I entered it into my phone. The location appeared almost 30 minutes away. The neighborhood was one of the wealthiest areas in the city. Definitely not where I expected someone in her condition to live. I looked at the map, then at her, then back at the map. My instincts told me to call a rideshare service and let professionals handle it. But another part of me wasn't comfortable leaving her alone. Not in that condition. Not at midnight. Not in the middle of a storm. Finally, I made a decision. "I'll drive you." She blinked. "Why?" "Good question." I wasn't entirely sure myself. "Because somebody should." For several seconds she stared at me. Then she smiled faintly. "You're probably going to regret that." At the time, I assumed she was joking. Looking back now, those were some of the most accurate words anyone had ever spoken to me. 20 minutes later, we were driving through the gates of one of the most exclusive residential communities in the city. Security guards verified the address before allowing us inside. My confusion grew with every turn. The houses became larger. The landscaping became more expensive. The entire neighborhood looked like something from a luxury magazine. Eventually, the navigation system instructed me to stop. I looked up. My jaw nearly dropped. The property in front of us looked more like a private estate than a home. Large stone walls surrounded the grounds. Multiple exterior lights illuminated the driveway. Luxury vehicles filled the parking area. "This is your house." Ilara nodded. I sat silently for a moment. Whatever consulting work she had done, it clearly paid well. After helping her walk to the front entrance, I rang the doorbell. A few seconds passed. Then footsteps approached from inside. The door opened, and my entire world changed. Standing in front of me was Dr. Maria Voskalder, one of the most powerful executives at Aegis Vertex Systems, my boss. And judging by the way she immediately rushed toward Ilara, the drunk woman I had just driven home was her daughter. In that moment, I realized my night was far from over. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Rain continued falling behind me. Water dripped from my jacket onto the stone entrance floor. Meanwhile, Dr. Maria Voskalder stared at me as though she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "Adifia." Her voice carried genuine surprise. I was equally shocked. Of all the people I expected to answer that door, she was probably the last. Before I could respond, her attention shifted back to Ilara. "What happened?" Ilara leaned against the doorway. Long story. Mireya immediately stepped forward and supported her daughter. The concern in her face caught me off guard. Inside the company, Mireya was known for being composed at all times. Employees often described her as intimidating. Yet standing there, she looked less like an executive and more like a worried mother. I found her near a bus stop, I explained. She almost walked into traffic. Mireya's expression tightened. Was she alone? Yes. That answer seemed to bother her, more than I expected. For a brief moment, she glanced toward Alara. The two exchanged a look I couldn't fully understand. It lasted less than a second. Then it disappeared. Thank you for bringing her home, Mireya said. I nodded. No problem. I was preparing to leave when she surprised me. Please come inside. I hesitated. That's not necessary. It is. Her tone wasn't rude. It was firm, the kind of tone that made people instinctively obey. A house employee appeared and helped Alara upstairs. As they disappeared from view, Mireya gestured toward a sitting room. I followed. The interior looked exactly how one would imagine the home of a powerful executive. Everything was immaculate. Every detail appeared carefully planned. Yet despite the luxury surrounding us, something felt strange. Mireya seemed distracted, almost anxious. She poured herself a glass of water, but barely touched it. Then she asked a question. Did Alara tell you anything during the drive? The question caught me off guard. I thought back to the conversation. The bus stop, the rain, her strange comments, the brief moment when she mentioned someone not wanting her to look at something. I considered bringing it up, then decided against it. It seemed like drunken rambling. Not really, I answered. Mostly small talk. Mireya remained silent. A subtle sense of relief crossed her face. Interesting. Why would that answer make her feel better? I tried not to overthink it. After all, it wasn't my business. A few minutes later, I finally left. The drive home should have been uneventful. Instead, my mind kept replaying everything. The expensive neighborhood, the strange question, the worried expression, and most importantly, the comment Alara had made at the bus stop. You ever get the feeling somebody doesn't want you looking at something? The word stayed with me. By the time I reached my apartment, it was almost 1 in the morning. I convinced myself I was reading too much into the situation. Then the next day happened. At exactly 8:17 a.m., an email arrived in my inbox. The sender was Human Resources. My first thought was that I had forgotten to submit some paperwork. Instead, I found something completely unexpected. My eyes widened. I read the message twice, then a third time. The company was reassigning me. Effective immediately, I had been transferred from logistics operations to a special internal audit division. The position came with a substantial salary increase, additional benefits, and direct access to executive-level projects. I stared at the screen. None of it made sense. I had no audit experience, no accounting background, no specialized financial training. There were dozens of employees more qualified than me. Yet somehow, I had been selected. A few minutes later, my phone rang. It was my department manager. Congratulations. I laughed nervously. For what? The promotion. I'm not sure it's a promotion. It definitely is. His voice sounded annoyed. Half the building wants to know how you got it. That wasn't reassuring. After the call ended, the rumors began. People noticed. Coworkers started asking questions. Managers started whispering. Some employees congratulated me. Others looked suspicious. By lunchtime, I could feel the attention following me through the office. I hated it. The following Monday, I reported to the executive building. The atmosphere there was completely different. Everything moved more quietly, more carefully. Every conversation seemed calculated. Every decision carried higher stakes. That morning I attended my first strategic review meeting. The room contained several senior executives, board representatives, outside consultants, and one person I immediately recognized, Celine Voskalder. She entered with complete confidence. Everyone greeted her warmly. Several executives stood to shake her hand. Clearly, she held significant influence. At first glance, she appeared impressive, professional, intelligent, highly respected, the kind of person people naturally trusted. Then something unexpected happened. During introductions, her attention landed on me. The smile on her face disappeared. Only for a moment, but I noticed. A flash of recognition. followed by something else. Concern. The expression vanished almost immediately. Most people wouldn't have noticed it. I did. Interesting. Very interesting. When introductions reached me, I extended my hand. Adifir Petrov. Celine shook it. Her grip was firm. Of course. The response sounded odd, as though she already knew exactly who I was. I released her hand. So you've heard of me? A brief pause followed. Then she smiled. The executive building is full of rumors. The answer sounded reasonable, yet something about it felt rehearsed. The meeting continued. Over the next 2 hours, I observed carefully. One thing became clear. Celine possessed enormous influence. People deferred to her recommendations. Her opinions carried unusual weight. Even executives seemed reluctant to challenge her. Several times I noticed Mireya studying her from across the room. Not hostile, not friendly, watchful, as if she was evaluating every word. The dynamic felt strange, and it became stranger over the following weeks. Every report I submitted received criticism from Celine. Every proposal faced additional scrutiny. Every recommendation encountered resistance. At first, I assumed she simply disliked my work. Then patterns began appearing. She wasn't challenging everyone, only me. Whenever I participated in meetings, she found a reason to undermine my conclusions. Whenever I identified inefficiencies, she dismissed them. Whenever I asked questions, she redirected the discussion elsewhere. The behavior was subtle, difficult to prove, but impossible to ignore. The more it happened, the more suspicious I became. Why was she so focused on me? We barely knew each other. One afternoon, while reviewing archive project expenditures, I accidentally noticed something unusual. A financial transfer. Then another. Then another. Individually, they looked harmless. Together, they formed a pattern. Millions of dollars had moved between multiple project accounts. The transfers were legal, at least on paper. Yet the timing made no sense. Neither did the destinations. I spent hours reviewing records. The deeper I looked, the stranger everything became. By evening, I had identified discrepancies approaching $40 million. My stomach tightened. This wasn't a clerical error. This wasn't accidental. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I printed the documentation, organized my notes, prepared a report, and submitted everything for review. At the time, I believed I was doing my job. I thought management would appreciate the discovery. I thought the company would investigate. I thought the truth would eventually emerge. I had no idea I had just stepped directly into a trap. Because less than 24 hours after reporting those discrepancies, someone started building a case against me. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 days after I submitted my report. I arrived at headquarters expecting a normal workday. Instead, my employee access card stopped working. I swiped it once. Nothing. Twice. Still nothing. A security officer approached. "Mr. Petrov?" "Yes. Please come with me." My stomach immediately tightened. The officer wasn't aggressive, but he wasn't giving me a choice either. People entering the building began looking in my direction. Some recognized me. Others simply sensed that something unusual was happening. Neither option was good. I followed him into a private conference room. 2 individuals were already waiting inside. One represented human resources. The other worked in corporate security. Neither looked happy. The HR representative folded her hands. "Adifir, we need to discuss several concerns." The phrase sounded rehearsed, as though she had practiced saying it beforehand. What concerns? The corporate security investigator slid a folder across the table. I opened it. My heart nearly stopped. Inside were screenshots, system logs, access records, confidential files, all carrying my employee credentials. According to the documents, I had entered restricted databases multiple times over the previous month. I stared at the evidence, then back at them. "This isn't possible." The investigator remained expressionless. "You're saying these records are false?" "Yes, all of them." "Absolutely." The problem was obvious. The records looked authentic, painfully authentic. If I had been sitting on the opposite side of the table, I probably would have believed them too. The investigator pointed to one timestamp. "Can you explain this access event?" I examined the date, then blinked. Twice. Something immediately stood out. This happened while I was at the Denver warehouse. The investigator frowned. What? I wasn't even in headquarters that day. He checked his notes. A brief silence followed. Interesting. Apparently, he hadn't verified that detail. Still, the discrepancy wasn't enough to clear me. Not even close. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. When it finally ended, my access privileges were suspended pending investigation. I was instructed not to contact employees regarding the case. My company laptop was confiscated. My building credentials were deactivated. And just like that, I became a suspect. The news spread quickly, far quicker than it should have. By lunchtime, people were already talking. By evening, rumors had reached departments I had never worked with. Some claimed I had stolen proprietary information. Others claimed I was selling company secrets. One rumor even suggested federal investigators were involved. None of it was true, but truth didn't seem to matter. Not anymore. The next week was one of the worst periods of my life. Friends stopped calling. Coworkers stopped responding. People who had once been friendly suddenly became distant. Nobody wanted to be associated with someone under investigation. Every morning I woke up hoping for answers. Every evening I went to bed with none. Then, on the 8th day, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Normally I would have ignored it. Something made me answer. Hello. A pause. Then a familiar voice. It's Alara. I sat upright. For a moment, I wasn't sure what to say. Since the night I drove her home, we had exchanged only a handful of brief messages. Nothing substantial, nothing personal. Yet hearing her voice now felt strangely reassuring. How did you get this number? My mother had it. Of course she did. What do you want? Another pause followed. Then her tone changed. More serious. I think you're being framed. I froze. The words landed like a hammer. What? I've been following what's happening. How? People talk. That was true, especially inside corporations. Information moved faster than official announcements. I rubbed my forehead. You think someone set me up? I don't think. She paused. I know. The certainty in her voice caught my attention. For the first time in days, genuine hope appeared. How? Meet me. Where? Not at headquarters. Obviously. She laughed quietly. Despite everything, the sound was oddly comforting. We agreed to meet at a small cafe on the opposite side of the city. The following afternoon, I arrived early. Alara appeared 15 minutes later. Unlike the woman I had met during the storm, she looked completely different. Focused, professional, alert. There was no trace of intoxication, no sign of confusion. She carried herself like someone accustomed to solving difficult problems. After sitting down, she skipped the small talk. I owe you an explanation. I nodded. That would be nice. She looked around carefully before continuing. I wasn't drunk because I was celebrating. That wasn't what I expected. Then why were you drunk? Her expression darkened. Because I thought I had just destroyed my career. Now she had my full attention. Over the next 20 minutes, she explained everything. Months earlier, she had worked as a cybersecurity consultant on a restructuring project connected to Aegis Vertex. During routine reviews, she discovered unusual data transfers between internal systems and external corporate entities. At first, she assumed they were authorized. Then she started asking questions. The responses never matched. Records disappeared. Approvals changed. Documents were modified after submission. The deeper she investigated, the stranger things became. Eventually, she reached a conclusion. Someone inside the restructuring project was hiding something significant, something expensive, something illegal. So what happened? I asked. I reported it. And she laughed bitterly. No one wanted to hear it. That answer worried me. A lot. Who was involved? She hesitated. Then she spoke a name. Celine. I stared at her. Celine Voskalder? Yes. The room suddenly felt quieter. A dozen memories replayed in my mind. The criticism, the hostility, the strange reaction during our first meeting, the constant attempts to undermine me. Pieces started fitting together. Not enough to see the full picture, but enough to recognize the shape. Alara leaned forward. After I reported my concerns, I was removed from the project. Officially, no. That answer was somehow worse. What happened then? She looked away. For a while, I tried gathering proof. And I failed. The honesty surprised me. Most people would have exaggerated. She didn't. I couldn't find anything concrete. Every trail disappeared. So you quit? She nodded. Eventually. For a few moments neither of us spoke. Then I remembered something. The access logs. The fabricated evidence. The timestamps. A possibility entered my mind. I reached into my folder and removed copies of the investigation documents. Ilara reviewed them carefully. Her expression changed almost immediately. What? She pointed toward one specific entry. This log shouldn't exist. I leaned closer. Why? Look at the creation date. I did. Then my blood ran cold. The file containing evidence against me had been generated before the system accessed it supposedly documented. I checked again. The discrepancy remained. A second record showed the same issue. Then a third. The implications were obvious. Someone had manufactured evidence. Not carelessly. Not accidentally. Deliberately. Weeks before the investigation began. My pulse accelerated. If this is real. It is. Then they planned this. Ilara nodded. That's exactly what scares me. Because if someone had prepared false evidence weeks in advance, then I was never the original target. I was the backup plan. The person chosen to absorb blame if anyone started asking the wrong questions. And somehow, without realizing it, I had stepped into that role. Outside, traffic continued moving normally. People walked past the cafe windows. Life carried on as usual. Yet inside, everything had changed. For the first time, I wasn't asking whether I was being framed. I knew I was. The real question was much worse. Who had enough power to build a false case against me? And what were they trying so desperately to hide? The moment Ilara and I confirmed that evidence against me had been fabricated, our priorities changed. Proving my innocence was no longer enough. We needed to find whoever had created the false records. And more importantly, we needed to understand why. For the next several days, we worked quietly. Very quietly. Neither of us trusted company communication systems anymore. We avoided corporate email. We avoided internal messaging platforms. Most of our conversations happened in person. The less information we left behind, the better. At first, progress was painfully slow. Every lead seemed to disappear. Every trail ended in missing files, altered records, or unexplained gaps. Someone had done an impressive job cleaning up after themselves. That alone told us something important. The people involved weren't amateurs. They understood investigations. They understood audits. And they clearly possessed influence inside the company. One evening, while reviewing old project documentation from her consulting work, Ilara suddenly stopped scrolling. Her eyes narrowed. What? She rotated her laptop toward me. Look at this. I leaned closer. The screen displayed archived storage transfer requests connected to one of Aegis Vertex's former research facilities. At first glance, nothing looked unusual. Boxes, documents, storage inventories, normal administrative records. Then I noticed something. The same name appeared repeatedly, over and over, across dozens of transfer authorizations. Corvin Hale, I read aloud. Who's that? Ilara clicked through several files. A facility manager. Current employee? No. She opened another document. Retired 3 years ago. I frowned. Then why is his name everywhere? That's exactly what I'm wondering. The more we reviewed the records, the stranger things became. Large quantities of archived paper documents had been transferred shortly before the restructuring project began. Most modern corporate records were digital. There was very little reason to move physical files, especially in such large quantities. Yet someone had ordered it, repeatedly, and every transfer seemed connected to facilities later reviewed by Celine's team. I looked at Ilara. You think this matters? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened another file. Then another. Then another. Eventually, she pointed toward a signature line. The authorization belonged to Celine. That got my attention. Okay. I sat back. Now I'm interested. The next challenge was finding Corvin Hale. Fortunately, retirement hadn't made him invisible. After several hours of searching public records, we located an address in a small town roughly 2 hours outside the city. The following Saturday, we drove there together. The town looked quiet, almost forgotten. Old storefronts lined the main street. Most businesses closed early. The pace felt completely different from corporate life. Corvin's house sat near the edge of town. Modest, well-maintained. A pickup truck occupied the driveway. As we approached the front door, I wasn't entirely sure what we expected to find. Maybe nothing. Maybe another dead end. Maybe a retired employee who remembered nothing useful. Ilara knocked. A few moments later, the door opened. The man standing there appeared to be in his late 60s. Gray hair, strong posture, sharp eyes. The kind of person who noticed details. Immediately, "Can I help you?" Ilara introduced us. The moment she mentioned Aegis Vertex, his expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. "Interesting. We only need a few minutes," she said. "I don't discuss company business." His response arrived instantly, as though he had given it before. Many times. "We're not from the company," I said. "Actually, the company is investigating me." That earned a reaction. A small one, but a reaction nonetheless. Corvin studied me carefully, then stepped aside. 5 minutes. We entered. The interior was simple and organized. Boxes of old books lined several shelves. Framed photographs covered one wall. Corvin offered coffee. We declined. Nobody wanted distractions. Ilara got straight to the point. "We found your name connected to multiple archive transfers." Corvin remained silent. "We're trying to understand why those documents were moved." Still nothing. Then she mentioned Celine. Everything changed. The retired manager slowly leaned back in his chair. For the first time, genuine concern appeared in his face. "You're asking dangerous questions." A chill ran through me. Those words rarely led anywhere good. "What do you know?" I asked. Corvin stared toward the window, as if debating whether to continue. Finally, he spoke. "Several months before I retired, I received unusual instructions." "What kind?" "Document relocation orders." "From Celine?" He nodded. The requests were excessive. I exchanged a glance with Ilara. This was already more information than we expected. Corvin continued. "Entire sections of archived records were removed from long-term storage." "Why?" "No explanation." "Did you ask?" A dry laugh escaped him. "Of course." And no answer. That wasn't surprising. The man stood and walked toward a cabinet. After unlocking it, he removed a thick folder. My pulse accelerated. Whatever was inside had clearly been preserved intentionally. Corvin placed it on the table. "I kept copies." I blinked. "You kept copies?" Facility managers learn not to trust unusual orders. That might have been the smartest sentence I had heard all year. Inside the folder were shipping manifests, storage inventories, transfer requests, vehicle records, authorization signatures, everything connected, everything documented, and most importantly, everything led toward a single destination, an abandoned records facility located outside the city. Ilara looked up. "These files were never digitized." Corvin nodded. "Exactly." A realization hit me. The transfer documents weren't removed to improve efficiency. They were removed because someone wanted them forgotten, hidden, buried, away from normal review processes. I looked at the address. The abandoned facility sat nearly 40 miles from headquarters, far from public attention, far from routine audits, far from anyone asking questions. The perfect place to hide something. Corvin crossed his arms. "If you're planning to go there, be careful." I frowned. "Why?" His answer arrived immediately. "Because several people visited after those records disappeared." My stomach tightened. "What people?" "I don't know." "Employees?" "Maybe." The uncertainty worried me. Then Corvin added something even worse. One of them asked whether I kept copies. The room fell silent. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. I felt the blood draining from my face. Someone had checked. Someone had specifically wanted to know whether evidence still existed. That meant the records mattered. A lot. Corvin pointed toward the folder. I told them no. "You lied." Yes. Why? He looked directly at me. Because honest people don't spend that much effort hiding paperwork. For a moment, nobody said anything. Then Alara carefully closed the folder. The evidence was real. The transfer records were real. And for the first time since this nightmare began, we had a lead that hadn't vanished. A lead that pointed somewhere physical, somewhere hidden, somewhere someone had worked very hard to keep buried. As we prepared to leave, Corvin walked us to the door. The afternoon sun was beginning to disappear behind the hills. Long shadows stretched across the road. Before we reached the driveway, he spoke one final time. If you find what's in those records. He paused, then looked directly at both of us. You'll understand why they wanted someone else blamed. The drive back to the city felt different. Neither Alara nor I talked much. We were both thinking about the same thing. The abandoned records facility, the missing documents, the people who had searched for Corvin, and the possibility that somewhere inside those forgotten archives lay the answer to everything. What we didn't know yet was that we were already being watched, and by the time we reached that facility, someone else would be waiting for us. The abandoned records facility sat at the end of a cracked service road, surrounded by overgrown vegetation. The place looked forgotten, which was exactly why it worried me. People often assumed dangerous secrets were hidden behind sophisticated security systems. In reality, the safest hiding place was frequently somewhere nobody bothered to visit. Alara and I arrived shortly after sunrise the following morning. Neither of us wanted to risk attracting attention. The fewer people who saw us, the better. From the outside, the facility resembled a neglected warehouse. Most of the windows were covered in dust. Several exterior lights had stopped functioning years ago. The parking lot was empty. At least, that was what I thought initially. Then I noticed tire tracks. Fresh ones. My stomach tightened. Someone's been here. Alara crouched beside the tracks. They're recent. How recent? She examined them carefully. Maybe less than 24 hours. Neither of us liked that answer. Not even a little. For several moments we stood silently, listening, watching. Nothing moved. No vehicles. No voices. No signs of activity. Still, the feeling remained. Someone had visited recently. The question was why. We approached the main entrance. To my surprise, the lock had already been broken. Not recently, but not decades ago either. The damage looked deliberate. Another bad sign. You ready? Alara asked. No. She nodded. Good. Me neither. We stepped inside. Dust filled the air. Rows of metal shelving stretched into the darkness. Thousands of boxes occupied the facility. Many carried old project numbers and storage labels. The scale was overwhelming. Finding anything useful would normally take weeks. Fortunately, Corvin's records included location references, aisle numbers, storage sections, transfer destinations. Without those documents, we never would have found the correct area. Nearly 30 minutes later, we reached the archive section listed in manifests. Several shelves stood completely empty. Others contained sealed storage containers. Most appeared untouched. Then Alara stopped walking. What is it? She pointed. A row of boxes showed signs of recent movement. Dust patterns had been disturbed. Someone had opened them. Recently. The same realization hit both of us simultaneously. We weren't the first people searching this facility. Someone else already knew what was hidden here. I opened the nearest container. Inside were project reports, financial summaries, licensing agreements. Nothing immediately explosive. But the more we reviewed, the more unusual the contents became. Certain projects appeared repeatedly. Certain companies appeared repeatedly. And many of those companies shared something interesting. They existed only on paper. Shell corporations. The kind investigators usually associated with fraud. My pulse accelerated. We continued searching. Hours passed. Then everything changed. Inside a sealed archive box labeled as obsolete infrastructure records, we discovered a collection of contracts. I examined the first one, then the second, then the third. My heart began pounding. This can't be right. Alara grabbed the documents. Her eyes widened. Oh my God. The contracts revealed unauthorized licensing agreements involving proprietary technology developed by Aegis Vertex. technology that legally could not be transferred without board approval. Yet somehow it had happened anyway, repeatedly, for years. The financial value alone was staggering. But the real problem wasn't the money. It was the deception. Entire transactions had been hidden from oversight committees. Reporting records had been altered. Approval chains had been manipulated. Someone had built an elaborate system designed to conceal the truth. And every trail led back toward restructuring projects overseen by Celine. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. The evidence was stronger than anything we had imagined. Then Alara found something else. An internal communication archive. Printed emails. Authorization requests. Meeting summaries. I began reading. The room suddenly felt colder. Because these documents answered the question that had haunted me for weeks. Why me? The answer sat directly in front of me. Several communications referenced a contingency strategy, a backup response plan, an alternative narrative if irregularities were discovered. That narrative required a responsible party, a scapegoat, someone with enough system access to appear credible, someone low enough in the hierarchy to be disposable, someone unlikely to receive support if accusations emerged. Me. I stared at the pages. My name appeared multiple times. Not as a suspect, as a planned solution. Weeks before I discovered the financial discrepancies. Weeks before the investigation began. Weeks before I knew anything was wrong. My role had already been selected. I wasn't framed because I uncovered the truth. I uncovered the truth because I accidentally walked into a trap that had already been prepared. The realization made me sick. Alara carefully placed a hand on my shoulder. You didn't deserve this. No. I looked at the documents, but somebody thought I did. For the first time since this nightmare began, anger replaced confusion. Pure anger. Someone had attempted to destroy my career, my reputation, my future. Not because I had done something wrong, because I was convenient. Then another discovery appeared, one that changed everything. At the bottom of a storage cabinet, hidden beneath unrelated project files, we found a secure archive binder. Inside were transaction records connecting shell corporations directly to private consulting payments. The recipient names immediately caught my attention. Several belonged to companies controlled by Celine. Not indirectly, not through complicated ownership structures. Directly, the connection was undeniable. The missing money, the hidden licensing agreements, the manipulated audits, the falsified evidence. Everything suddenly fit together. For the first time, we could see the entire picture, and it was far bigger than either of us expected. This is enough, I said. It has to be. Alara nodded. We finally have proof. Unfortunately, our celebration lasted less than 10 seconds, because at that exact moment, I heard something. A sound from the opposite side of the facility. A door closing. Both of us froze. The noise echoed through the building. Then silence returned. Slowly, I turned my head. Someone else was inside. The realization hit instantly. We weren't alone. Alara whispered, "Did you hear that?" Yes. Her face had gone pale. Mine probably looked the same. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then footsteps echoed somewhere beyond the shelves. Slow, deliberate, not hiding, not rushing. Whoever was there wanted us to know. Another step. Then another. My pulse hammered against my ribs. The archive suddenly felt much smaller, much more dangerous. I looked around quickly. There was only one exit nearby, too far away, and whoever had entered might already be between us and the door. The footsteps stopped. Complete silence returned. Then a voice echoed through the facility. Calm, confident, and immediately recognizable. You're both making a very serious mistake. Every muscle in my body tightened, because I knew that voice. So did Alara. There was no doubt, no uncertainty, no possibility of error. Standing somewhere beyond the shelves was Celine Vos Calder. And somehow, she already knew exactly what we had found. The moment I heard Celine's voice echo through the archive facility, I realized something important. She wasn't surprised to find us there. She had expected us. Maybe not on that exact day. Maybe not at that exact hour. But she knew someone would eventually follow the trail, which meant she had come prepared. The question was whether we had. Alara and I stood motionless between the shelves. The archived binder remained in my hands. Every piece of evidence we had spent weeks searching for was finally within reach, and now the person connected to all of it was somewhere inside the building, watching us, waiting. Another set of footsteps echoed across the concrete floor. Then Celine appeared at the end of the aisle. She looked completely calm. No panic, no fear, no visible concern. If anything, she looked annoyed, like someone dealing with an inconvenience. Her gaze landed on the binder, then shifted to me. Adifir, I said nothing. Give me the documents. I almost laughed. The request was absurd. After everything that had happened, she actually expected cooperation. No, for the first time, a small crack appeared in her confidence. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Funny. I held up the binder. I was thinking the same thing. Her expression darkened. The polite mask began slipping. Slowly. Dangerously. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then she surprised me. Instead of denying anything, she sighed, as if she were tired. You really don't understand what's happening. I stared at her. Then explain it. To my astonishment, she actually tried. According to Celine, the licensing agreements had originally been created to save failing divisions within the company. The board wanted profits. Investors wanted growth. Executives wanted results. Rules became obstacles. So exceptions were made. Then more exceptions. Then more. Eventually, entire systems were built around those exceptions. By the time she became involved, the operation was already generating enormous amounts of money. People benefited, she said. Everyone benefited. I shook my head. Not everyone. Her eyes narrowed. You're thinking too small. No. I pointed toward the documents. You're thinking nobody would notice. For the first time, genuine anger flashed across her face. There it was. The real Celine. Not the polished consultant. Not the respected advisor. The person beneath the performance. And that person was furious. You think exposing this fixes anything? I answered immediately. It fixes the truth. A bitter laugh escaped her. The truth. She looked at both of us. Do you know how many careers disappear if those records become public? I did. Probably dozens. Maybe more. But that wasn't a reason to hide the evidence. It was a reason to reveal it. Before the confrontation could continue, another sound echoed through the facility. This time it wasn't footsteps. It was a phone ringing. Celine glanced downward. Then her face changed. The call clearly wasn't expected. She answered immediately. The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds, but it was enough. When she lowered the phone, her confidence was gone. Completely gone. I exchanged a glance with Alara. Something had happened. Something significant. Celine ended the call, then looked directly at me. For the first time since meeting her, she appeared worried. Actually worried. What happened? I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she turned and walked away. Just like that. No threats. No arguments. No final speech. She simply left. The moment she disappeared, Alara spoke. That's not normal. No. I stared toward the exit. Not even close. We packed every relevant document, photographed everything else, created multiple copies, and left immediately. By the time we reached the city, we finally understood the phone call, because the emergency board meeting invitation had already been sent. Someone else had discovered enough evidence to force immediate action. The next morning, headquarters felt different, tense, uneasy. The atmosphere resembled the hours before a storm. Employees whispered in hallways. Managers avoided eye contact. Security presence had increased throughout the building. Everyone knew something major was happening. Nobody knew exactly what. At 10 a.m., I entered the executive boardroom, the largest conference room in the building. The room was already full. Board members, senior executives, legal advisors, corporate investigators, and sitting near the far end of the table, Celine. She looked exhausted. For the first time, she appeared human. Not powerful, not untouchable, just tired. The meeting began. Corporate investigators presented findings first. Financial discrepancies, licensing irregularities, questionable consulting arrangements, missing oversight approvals. Every presentation chipped away at Celine's position. Yet she still fought back. When her turn arrived, she launched an aggressive defense. She challenged timelines, questioned interpretations, attacked conclusions, and finally, she blamed me. Again, according to her version of events, I had manipulated records and created confusion throughout the audit process. The accusation would have terrified me weeks earlier. Not anymore, because this time I wasn't alone. After Celine finished speaking, Dr. Mireya Voskalder stood. The room immediately became silent. Mireya rarely spoke during board proceedings unless absolutely necessary. When she did, people listened, and she had come prepared, very prepared. One by one, she introduced the evidence, the shipping manifests from Corvin, the archive records, the licensing agreements, the financial transfers, the shell company connections, the communications discussing contingency plans, the fabricated evidence intended for me. Every piece fit perfectly. Every piece reinforced the others. Every piece pointed toward the same conclusion. By the end, nobody was arguing anymore. Not even Celine. Then came the final blow. One board member revealed that independent investigators had already verified the archive materials before the meeting began. The evidence wasn't merely convincing. It was authenticated, confirmed, undeniable. The room fell silent. I looked toward Celine. She wasn't speaking anymore. She wasn't defending herself anymore. She wasn't even pretending. She knew it was over. The vote happened less than 20 minutes later. Her consulting contract was terminated immediately. All internal access was revoked. The company referred the matter to outside authorities for further investigation. And just like that, the woman who had controlled entire rooms with a single sentence lost everything. But the story didn't end there. Over the following months, investigators uncovered the full scope of the operation. Additional consultants became involved. Hidden financial networks were exposed. Several executives resigned before disciplinary proceedings could begin. Multiple lawsuits followed. Government regulators launched inquiries. The fallout spread far beyond Aegis Vertex. As for Celine, the consequences continued growing. Her professional licenses were revoked. Corporate clients abandoned her. Industry organizations removed her memberships. Every opportunity she spent years building disappeared. Not because of rumors, because of documented facts. That was her karma. She had built her success on secrecy. The truth destroyed it. Meanwhile, my own situation changed in ways I never expected. The accusations against me were formally dismissed. My reputation was restored. The company publicly acknowledged the falsified evidence. Several executives personally apologized. A few even looked embarrassed while doing it. Good. They should have been. One afternoon, several weeks after the investigation concluded, Mireya invited me to her office. I assumed she wanted an update. Instead, she offered me a new position, Director of Compliance Operations. I almost laughed. A few months earlier, I had been one step away from losing my career. Now I was being asked to help protect the company from future misconduct. Life had a strange sense of humor. You earned this, Mireya said. I wasn't sure about that, but I accepted. Later that evening, I met Alara for dinner. The first normal dinner either of us had enjoyed in months. No investigations, no hidden documents, no conspiracies, just food and conversation. For the first time since the stormy night, when I found her at the bus stop, everything felt calm. Eventually she smiled. You know something? What? If you had driven past me that night, none of this would have happened. She was right. One decision, one stop, one ride home. That was all it took. I looked out the restaurant window toward the city lights, then back at her. Yeah, I smiled, and I'm glad I didn't. That is how the strangest chapter of my life began and ended. Not with a promotion, not with an investigation, not with a conspiracy, but with a simple choice to help a stranger on a rainy night. A choice that exposed the truth, saved my career, and brought down someone who believed she would never be held accountable. Sometimes the biggest stories begin with the smallest decisions, and sometimes the truth survives because ordinary people refuse to stop looking for it. The end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more dramatic first-person stories filled with twists, secrets, betrayals, and satisfying endings. And tell me in the comments, at what moment did you first suspect Celine was behind everything?